Every time he stepped on the ice, I'm telling you, he was a great performer. On the golf course.
At this stage of my life, admiration in hockey is very clear to me. It was never tied to trophies, statistics, or reputation. Admiration was something I felt only in specific moments when a player altered the game in a way I could not ignore.
There were nights when everything felt under control. The pace made sense, the decisions came naturally. But there were also rare nights when that rhythm disappeared. Not because of pressure or physical play, but because someone on the ice was already thinking one step ahead. Against those players, the game demanded precision instead of instinct. Every choice had to be made earlier.
Every mistake carried weight. What I respected most was how quietly they did it. They did not force chaos. They did not chase. They read, they anticipated, and they closed options before they even became visible. Playing against them meant accepting that skill alone was not enough. You had to adapt or fall behind.
Looking back now, I understand why my admiration was reserved for so few. When you play at a high level, true respect is earned only by those who can remove your advantages without ever raising their voice.
To understand why those players earned my admiration, you first need to understand who I was on the ice.
I was born on January 1st, 1951, and I played the game from the middle of the ice where decisions matter most. I was a center who relied on technique, vision, and puck control, not on power or intimidation.
I never played a heavy game, and I never tried to impose myself through force. My hockey was built on reading situations, anticipating movement, and staying one step ahead mentally. I spent my entire career with one team accepting the reality that the Stanley Cup would never define my path. That style shaped how I viewed the game and how I judged the players I respected. With that mindset, these are the 5 players who earned my admiration. Number 5, Jean Béliveau.
When I think about admiration, Jean Béliveau represents something very specific. Control without force. Authority without noise. He was never rushed, never reactive, and never tempted to play outside his limits.
Against him, the game slowed down in a way that felt deliberate, almost calculated. That kind of presence is rare, and it stays with you.
Béliveau did not overwhelm you physically, and he did not rely on speed to intimidate. What made him difficult was how little he gave you. No unnecessary movement, no wasted decisions. Every shift against him felt structured, as if the ice itself had boundaries you were not allowed to cross. As a center, that was frustrating because it meant creativity had to be restrained. You could not improvise freely.
You had to respect the space he controlled. What I admired most was his discipline. Béliveau understood when to engage and when to wait. He never chased the play. He positioned himself so that your options disappeared naturally. Passing lanes closed.
Timing felt off. Suddenly, what should have been a simple play required more thought than usual. That is the kind of pressure that does not show up on a score sheet, but every center on the ice feels it.
He played the game with a sense of responsibility that went beyond individual moments. You could tell he was always thinking about balance, about structure, about keeping the game within parameters that favored intelligence over impulse. For a player like me who valued puck control and decision-making, that was a challenge I respected deeply.
Béliveau set a standard for how a center could influence the game without dominating it physically. He proved that elegance and authority could coexist.
That you could dictate the flow of play simply by being in the right place at the right time every single shift.
That is why he earns this place on my list. Not because of legacy or history, but because of how he made the game feel when you shared the ice with him. Playing against Jean Béliveau forced you to play cleaner, think earlier, and accept that patience could be just as powerful as talent.
Number 4, Stan Mikita.
Stan Mikita forced me to confront a different kind of challenge. Where others relied on structure or patience, Mikita introduced uncertainty. He changed angles, altered timing, and broke patterns before you could settle into them. Against him, the game refused to stay predictable.
That is why he earned my admiration. Mikita did not play within the traditional expectations of a center. He experimented, he adjusted mid-shift. He was willing to take a line you did not expect and then punish you for assuming he would play it safe. As a center myself, that was unsettling. You prepare for habits, you read tendencies. Mikita made those habits unreliable.
What made him difficult was not chaos, it was intention. Every deviation had a purpose. He understood how defenders and centers were taught to read the ice, and he deliberately disrupted those reads.
Passing lanes appear where they should not exist.
Shots came off the blades sooner than expected. Suddenly, the defensive structure you trusted felt fragile.
Playing against Mikita required constant recalibration. You could not rely on timing alone. You had to stay alert to possibilities that most players would never attempt.
One moment of hesitation was enough for him to exploit a gap.
That pressure was mental, not physical, and it never stopped.
I respected how he expanded the boundaries of what a center could be. Mikita showed that intelligence in hockey could be creative without being reckless.
He proved that innovation was not about flash, but about understanding the game deeply enough to bend it without breaking it.
Against him, I learned the cost of assuming stability. The game demanded attention from the opening face-off to the final whistle. That kind of demand sharpens you. It forces discipline. It raises your standard.
That is why Stan Mikita stands here. Not for what he won, not for how he was celebrated, but for how he challenged the way the game was played.
Sharing the ice with him meant accepting that the game would not behave normally, and that you would have to think faster, cleaner, and more decisively to keep up. Number 3, Bobby Clarke. Bobby Clarke represented a test I could never ignore. He did not challenge you by matching your style. He challenged you by disrupting it entirely.
Against Clarke, the game was uncomfortable from the first shift, not because of intimidation, but because of constant mental pressure. He never let the game settle.
Clarke played inside your decisions. He read patterns quickly and attacked them without hesitation. He forced you to abandon rhythm and play in fragments. As a center, that is exhausting. You rely on flow, on sequences, on timing between reads. Clarke broke those sequences deliberately. Every shift felt shorter, tighter, and more demanding than it should have been.
What made him difficult was his persistence. He did not disappear for stretches. He stayed involved in every moment that mattered. Face-offs, transitions, loose pucks, rebounds. Clarke was always present, always engaged, always forcing you to react.
That kind of presence drains focus over time. You start thinking less about creating and more about surviving the shift cleanly. I respected how he understood leverage. Clarke knew when to apply pressure and when to retreat just enough to bait a mistake. He did not chase skill. He waited for it to expose itself.
Against him, creativity carried risk. Every extra touch of the puck increased the chance that he would disrupt the play before it developed. He also forced accountability. When you played against Clarke, there was no hiding in the structure of the game. He pulled you into direct responsibility for every decision you made. If you lost focus, even briefly, he punished it.
That kind of challenge sharpens your awareness, whether you want it to or not. What earned my admiration was not how he played, but how consistently he imposed his mindset. Clarke demanded engagement. He demanded discipline. He demanded that you play the game on his terms or accept the consequences.
That is not easy for a skill center to face because it strips away comfort.
Against Bobby Clarke, you learned the value of control under pressure. You learned that intelligence in hockey is not always quiet or elegant. Sometimes it is relentless. Sometimes it is invasive.
Sometimes it forces you to confront parts of your game you would rather avoid.
That is why he stands here. Not because of reputation or history, but because of how he altered the experience of the game itself. Playing against Bobby Clarke meant understanding that skill alone was never enough. You had to withstand pressure, manage discomfort, and remain precise in an environment designed to pull you apart. Number 2, Marcel Dionne.
Marcel Dionne challenged me in a way very few players ever did. There was no confusion about what he represented. Precision, efficiency, absolute control over execution. Against Dionne, the margin for error disappeared almost entirely. You were not allowed to be slightly late. You were not allowed to be slightly careless. Everything had to be exact. He played the game without excess, no wasted motion, no unnecessary risk. Every touch of the puck served the purpose, and every decision arrived at the right moment. As a center who valued control and reading the game that forced me into a constant comparison, you were not just reacting to him, you were measuring yourself against a standard.
What made Dionne so difficult was how little he needed to dominate a shift. He did not need long possessions. He did not need repeated chances. One opening was enough.
If you lost structure for even a brief second, he converted it into an advantage. That kind of threat changes how you play. You start managing risk more carefully. You start questioning decisions you would normally make without hesitation.
Playing against Dionne felt like a mirror. There was no intimidation, no chaos, no attempt to disrupt rhythm through pressure. Instead, he demanded that you be as clean and efficient as he was.
That is a different kind of challenge. It forces discipline.
It exposes flaws that physical play often hides.
I respected how he trusted his game completely. Dionne never rushed. He never forced plays that were not there. He waited for the smallest breakdown and acted immediately. Against him, patience alone was not enough. You needed awareness and precision at all times.
What earned my admiration was his consistency. Night after night, shift after shift, his level never dropped. There was no emotional fluctuation, no visible frustration, just execution.
That kind of reliability is rare, especially for a player whose game depends on timing and decision-making.
Against Marcel Dionne, you learn that excellence does not need to announce itself. It simply arrives, does its work, and leaves no room for excuses. That is why he stands at number 2.
You represented the highest standard of control skill, and facing him forced me to sharpen every part of my game just to remain competitive. Number 1, Guy Lafleur.
Guy Lafleur earned my highest admiration because he changed the game before you could react to it. Not after, before. Against him, there was no time to settle, no moment to organize, no chance to feel in control.
The game accelerated the instant he touched the puck, and once that happened, everything you planned became secondary. What made Lafleur different was not just speed. Many players skated fast. Lafleur thought fast. His decisions arrived earlier than everyone else's. By the time you recognized the situation, he was already acting on the next one. As a center, that was the most demanding challenge you could face. You were constantly behind the play, even when you believed you were in position.
He did not need chaos to dominate. He created pressure simply by existing in motion. His routes forced defenders and centers to adjust prematurely. Passing lanes shifted. Defensive structure stretched.
The ice felt wider for him and smaller for everyone else. Against Lafleur, reading the game was not enough. You had to anticipate it before it revealed itself. I admired how complete his threat was. If you gave him space, he punished you. If you closed quickly, he slipped away. If you focused on stopping him, someone else became free. He forced collective awareness. One mistake did not belong to one player. It belonged to the entire line.
What earned my respect most was his confidence in tempo. Lafleur decided how fast the game would be played, and everyone else followed. You could not slow him down by discipline alone.
You had to accept that the pace would be uncomfortable and still remain precise. That is an extraordinary demand to place on an opponent. Against him, instinct became risky. You could not chase. You could not hesitate. You had to trust your reads completely, because a half decision was enough for him to break the game open.
That kind of pressure reshapes how you think as a center. It forces humility.
It forces clarity.
Guy Lafleur stands at number 1 because he represented the ultimate test of awareness. Not power, not intimidation, awareness.
He showed that the most dangerous players are the ones who control time itself on the ice.
Playing against him meant accepting that the game would move faster than you wanted and that your only chance was to rise to that speed without losing control.
That is the highest form of admiration I can give. Looking back now, those 5 names form a very clear picture in my mind. They were not chosen because of numbers, trophies, or how history remembers them. They earn my admiration because of how they changed the experience of the game when I shared the ice with them. Each one forced a different adjustment. Each one demanded a higher level of awareness.
Jean Béliveau taught control and restraint. Stan Mikita taught unpredictability and innovation. Bobby Clarke imposed relentless mental pressure. Marcel Dionne set a standard of precision that left no margin for error. Guy Lafleur pushed the game forward at a speed that reshaped how you thought about time and space. Together they represented everything I respected about hockey at its highest level.
What connects them is not style, personality, or reputation. It is responsibility. They took responsibility for the flow of the game. They dictated tempo, removed comfort, and forced opponents to play honestly. Against them, shortcuts did not exist. You either adapted or you fell behind. I never admired players simply for being dominant. I admired the ones who made me work, who made me think, and who made me question my own habits. Those are the players who improve you, whether you like it or not. I spent my career trusting skill and intelligence, and these 5 men challenged both. They showed me that true greatness in hockey is not loud. It does not need intimidation.
It reveals itself quietly through control, anticipation, and timing.
That is why they earn my admiration, and that is why even now they are the names that remain